All right. Hello and welcome once again to College Conversations for September 2023. My name is Richard Ruther with the APH Connect Center. Again, College Conversations, navigating disability resources and critical campus supports. We've got an excellent panel of experts, students, and professionals with us today who are going to share out information, and they will invite you to put your questions in the chat. We've got about 5 or 6 questions we're going to attempt to get to in the next hour. I'm going to welcome one of our parent advocates and supporters of the Connect Center, Lisa Lloyd, to be our host. Lisa, in just a moment, I also want to acknowledge Lori Scharf and Katie Frederick, our APH staff, for supporting this. And Lisa Lloyd, good afternoon, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa Lloyd. I'll just start off by introducing myself, and then I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves. I, as Richard said, am one of the parent advocates. I am an APH Connect student advisor, and I used to teach orientation to college classes and student success on a community college campus. I also have RP, and I have a daughter who has LCA, who attends California School for the Blind. I'm going to go ahead and have our next presenter introduce herself. Enter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hunter Duncan. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Assistant Director for Academic Accommodations in the Student Accessibility Services Office at Clemson University in South Carolina. And just a little bit about me. I have retinopathy of prematurity, and I use a guide dog as a mobility aid. And I'm very excited to be chatting with you all today.
Wonderful. And NG.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angie Hall, she, her pronouns. I'm an Asian with black hair, some of it turning gray, middle-aged. I'm happy to be with you today. I am serving as the director of the Disability Resource Center at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. And I also serve as ADA coordinator for all 5 of our campuses. Before this point, I had a similar role at the University of Toledo in Ohio. And before that, I worked in the disability office at the Ohio State University. So my career has been completely in higher education. And my educational background, I have a master's in rehabilitation counseling, also a licensed professional counselor. As an undergrad, got my degrees in speech language pathology and music. I also have RP, and once upon a time had more vision and now have no usable vision at all.
And 4 children on top of
That's
all
right,
of that.
4 children, yes.
Very impressive. Thank you, NG. And our star of our show, Ryan Mentor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Mentor. I am totally blind due to a pediatric brain tumor. I work with the American Printing House as an intern with the Transition Hub, and I also serve as a student advisor on the APH Career Connect Center Student Advisory Committee. I am currently pursuing my Juris Doctor at Case Western Reserve University School of Law in Cleveland, Ohio, and I hope to eventually practice disability rights law.
Wonderful. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Our first question is, what does an incoming college student do to get connected to disability services? And how is it different than back at high school? Angie, you want to start?
Sure. So the first step is doing your research online, read up on the colleges, and then when you're ready, start at the very beginning. When you're looking at colleges, visit the college, visit the disability office, because truly a disability office can make you or break you when it comes to being a blind student. You want to interview them as well as make sure that the university has the major and the areas of study that you want to participate in.
Hunter, did you have anything to add to that?
That was a great comment, NG. I really do agree with that. I think that for specifically incoming college students, it's really important to kind of know what perhaps types of accommodations have worked for you in high school and how that might translate to the higher education environment, because that could differ. And knowing that maybe each class that you're taking might differ as well in college, kind of taking everything that you've experienced in high school and saying, okay, how will this work in college, would be really helpful. And as Angie suggested, like talking with the Disability Resource Center or the Disability Services Office on each campus can really help enlighten that information for you.
And remember that the laws are different from high school to college. In high school, you have IDEA. In college, it is there is no IDEA. There is ADA and Section 504 of the Rehab Act. And we switch from a model of success to a model of ensuring access. So our goal is for you to have equitable access through accommodations and other means, and also equal opportunity for you to be able to do what everyone else is able to do as a college student here.
And Ryan, do you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of what you have said, and I think it's really important to highlight that for a lot of students, and I was this way too when I attended my undergrad and choosing a law school, making sure that the accessibility office and the services that they offer are something that you want to work with, and interviewing them and making sure that you feel comfortable with the way that they interact with you and the services that they can provide you. It's really important to talk to them and to know the office and the people there, and how they can support you before you commit to a university. And I was going to touch on what you said as well, Angie, which is that it's important to note that it's very different in the sense that in high school and years before, middle school, whatever, prior to undergrad, you have your IEP, and so teachers or your case manager, your team will generally do a lot of the work to get your accommodations figured out. You're involved, but maybe not as much. When you get to college, you have to take that initiative and you have to reach out to them, and you have to be the person to figure out A, what accommodations you need, and B, you have to communicate that to them so they can put a plan together.
Thank you. Anything left to add there? Lori, Richard? All right, we'll go on. The second question is, how far in advance should the student contact disability services? Hunter?
Great question. I think ultimately how far in advance may depend on the university and sort of the protocols of the office. So for example, at my current institution, Clemson, we start working with incoming freshmen, or incoming students rather, once they have a course schedule in place. However, for students who are blind or low vision, we do like to work with them as in advance as possible, even if you don't have a course schedule right off the bat. We want to get connected with you as in advance as possible, because there may be textbooks that you might need to get converted into an accessible format. And oftentimes that could take maybe some extra time. And even if we don't have your professor's syllabi right away, we can get an understanding of the classes that you may be interested in enrolling in and get a game plan in place for corresponding with your faculty and getting those course syllabi that are quite elusive sooner rather than later. We advise that students contact us as opposed to their parents or guardians, because we are specifically oriented to work directly with the student. So that might be also a slight difference from perhaps the K-12 system, where maybe guardians or parents were more involved. But if a student contacts us directly, like, we are happy to work with you. And again, the sooner is better than later when it comes to maybe some accessible formatting for your textbooks, getting you oriented to campus. There just may be some other kind of layers that we need to figure out in advance. And then once we have that course schedule, we can begin kind of the footwork of working more directly with your professors.
Angie, did you have anything to add?
Sure. Each college will have its own process. So something to keep in mind is that the college may ask you for an IEP, or they may want a letter from your doctor. So read up on that and see what that process is. Some colleges will meet with you first, talk to you, and then let you know what is necessary. For example, to Hunter's point of getting materials for our blind and low vision students, a Braille book can take upwards of 6 months to produce, because we're working with vendors to try to figure out what the best method is. And universities, processes move slowly here. So we go through the purchasing process of making sure that we can get that textbook in a timely manner. And so the sooner you let us know that you are committing to coming to our institution, the better that it's going to be.
So I'm thinking spring if I'm coming there in
Yes.
fall. That's what I'm thinking. And it's a nightmare when a student doesn't have a textbook when they need it. If that class is, ready to go and you don't have that textbook, it's really tricky. You might have to move your whole schedule around and even take the class at a later time. Ryan, did you want to share any personal experience?
Yeah, so for my undergrad and law school as well, but I'm thinking of my undergrad first, I reached out to the accessibility and accommodations office right when I knew I was even considering applying, just to get to know them, to get an idea for their processes, and to let them know sort of the needs that I would have should I go there. And once I knew that was where I was going, I reached out to them right away and scheduled a meeting so we could go through the accommodations that I'd had in the past and figure out what they offered that was equivalent to that, if there were additional things I need, if there were some things that I wouldn't need. Law school was a bit more challenging because they didn't assign the list of course. Well, you had the course that you'd have, but you didn't know the professors, and the professors dictated which book you'd have. And they didn't assign those until 2 weeks before classes start. So I started my first year 3 weeks ago, but I didn't ordinarily would not have known the books that I would need to get in an accessible either Braille or BRF format until 2 weeks before then. So I reached out to the university and asked if they could assign me one of the two sections, either section A or B, a little sooner so we could get a heads up on getting those books put together, because I can't read print law books. So they were really accommodating in that regard. I think some schools are really willing to do that, and some might be a little more difficult, but it never hurts to ask and just explain that it takes some additional time to get books put into an accessible format. So if they can give you your section assignments a little sooner, it gives the accessibility office additional time to get that ball rolling.
I remember some instructors at the community colleges would change their textbook 2 or 3 weeks before school would begin. Yeah. Okay, next question. What are the responsibilities of the Disability Services Office, the professor or instructor, as we used to call them at community colleges, and the student? Angie?
Sure. So the disability office's main responsibility is to work with the student to determine what those accommodations look like. And accommodations can change. We may introduce you to different tools, different strategies, and visual status can change too. So it is important that a student keep in contact and say, hey, this is not working, so that we can take a look at what would work to make sure that the student has access. The disability office also coordinates accommodations. So this could be testing, getting textbooks, making sure materials are accessible, the interface that you're using in the learning management system. There might be supplemental software that we need to take a look at to make sure that you're able to do homework just like everybody else. You may need an assistant to do a lab course that acts as your hands and your eyes. You may need adaptive equipment during tests or a test assist. So definitely the disability office will coordinate those pieces. So then the instructor, their role is to teach the class. They determine what the learning objectives are, what the class expectations are, what are those requirements that all students are expected to complete in college. So disability or not, all students are expected to do the same tasks that are detailed in the syllabus that the professor talks about in class. And then instructors can also help to implement accommodations. For instance, if there is an online exam, they can go in there and extend the time if that's an accommodation for a student. Or they can take a document and enlarge it and provide it to the student. So it would be a conversation that happens between the disability office, the instructor, and also the student. And then the student's role is to keep the lines of communication open and also to identify as disabled. There is nothing that tells us when you're coming into college that you're a disabled student, that you're a blind student or low vision student. It is up to the student to share that information with the disability office. The information from a medical perspective is private, so we don't share any of that information. We really focus on this is how instructor and campus partners can best provide access to the students, can provide accommodations, can support the learning process. And then the student has the responsibility to also request accommodations and to indicate how they're going to use their accommodations. So if there's an exam that they want to take with accommodations, they would make the arrangements with the disability office, if the disability office are the ones who are proctoring the exam, or they arrange it with the professor. If it's a short quiz, maybe arrangements can be done. But what we want is the student to be comfortable in that situation. So we say, work with the disability office, and we'll work with the instructors if there's a question of whether an accommodation is appropriate or reasonable. But if not, if that isn't part of the conversation, then you, like any other student, can talk to your professors about the academic pieces and what supports would be helpful to you. Important also to learn your technology ahead of time as students. We do so much in a technological space here in higher education, the learning management system, and then all the software that is connected to that. So it is important for you to effectively be able to utilize your assistive technology.
Very thorough, Angie. Did you ever have an instructor or professor reach out to you asking, how can I best work with a student that's blind? I'm just curious if that ever happens.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Until a professor, or really even a disability office, right? Until they've had their first blind or low vision student, it seems to be scary for people, right? Like, we're desensitized because we have lived experience, but it's really great if the student can say to the instructor, hey, if you have questions, I'm here as a resource to you. This might be a new experience, but the disability office is also a resource to you. But I've had some like fantastic instructors who are like, I want the student to be able to participate. What can I do? And they really have done their part to make documents accessible, to choose material that's already natively digital. So that has really enhanced the experience for our students, but also students without disabilities, because it removes barriers for everybody.
Good point. Hunter, did you have anything to add?
I totally agree with Angie. Everything, you go, girl. This is so true. And to the point of professors reaching out and to talk through, how do I best work with this blind student or this student low vision? I agree, that happens with our office pretty consistently, especially too, perhaps for courses that are dealing with like labs. So like chemistry, biology, things like that, that perhaps have a little bit more, I don't know, lab related things. My degrees are all in English, y'all. So I am not a science person, but generally we get a lot of questions from professors, and I would suggest, like, from the student's perspective, the more open you are to talking through things with your professors, just I think the better the experience will likely be for you. Your professors really want to help you and make your experience in their course accessible. And in order for them to do that, having really open conversations, in my experience, has always been super, super helpful.
And Ryan, anything to share on this one?
Nothing really additional to add. The only two quick things I want to say is I really want to stress that the student's responsibility is the communication. I know Angie talked about this, but having completed my undergrad and partway through law school, the disability office is there to support you, and they will do everything they can to do that. But you as the student need to make sure that they know if you're facing any problems. And it's really important to make sure that you emphasize those issues and you reach out if there's a problem when they happen, and don't let it become something bigger. So if you're having an issue with a professor not implementing your accommodations, or you're having an issue because there's accommodation you don't have that you think you need, or something to that effect, let them know when that issue pops up, and don't wait on it until a later date, because then you'll be partway through the semester, you'll be at finals, and you'll be scrambling because you haven't gotten what you need and you're not in the best place to succeed.
Ryan, did that ever happen to you? I'm just curious.
No, both of the accessibility office at my undergrad, especially, I haven't been here at the law school long enough to get a full reading, but it seems pretty good so far. But the accessibility office at my undergrad was really great. And when I came in, I got hard copy Braille textbooks, and I had someone to work with me during stats and individual one-on-one. So they really gave me everything that I could possibly need right then. And so I never had those issues, but I know people that did.
Can you share what the undergrad school was, just so we know?
I'm sorry?
Can you share what your undergrad school was?
Oh, I went to Southern New Hampshire University. Absolutely amazing, academically, as well as the accessibility office was phenomenal.
Great.
Both online and on campus.
Excellent.
And this
Go
is
ahead.
Lori. If I could just add that this is where self-awareness by the student as well as self-advocacy really come into play. And sometimes when you're entering college, and not even sometimes the first semester is really good, it's like the honeymoon phase. And then you get to higher level classes or statistics, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm missing. So you have to be able to be aware enough to say, I'm totally lost and I don't even know what's going on. And that's where you can go to the disability office and flush things out with them and find out about other resources in the campus that may be available to all students, because a lot of people struggle with statistics, not just blind people. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
It's okay to, I think it's important to just know and understand from the student's perspective that it's okay to reach out to the accessibility. I would say, I don't necessarily know what I need, but this is the issue that I'm having, and they can help you figure out what might assist you.
Good point. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. How can the student utilize other campus services like the writing lab or the math lab and their faculty, the subject matter experts? Hunter, did you want to start?
Sure. So I would say that always ask what resources are available to you, especially if you're new to the campus, or, oftentimes higher education has a bunch of acronyms that they like to use with all of their different departments and all of the different resources on campus, and it can be really confusing. So clarifying, what does this department do? What does this resource offer? How do I get in touch with, this particular resource on campus, things like that. Your disability services office will always be there to connect you with these resources. And importantly to note is that the resources that we're referencing here, for example, the writing lab, the academic success center, tutoring, professor office hours, those are all resources that likely are separate from the disability services office, and focus on student success as opposed to perhaps student access. So NG mentioned this at the top of our conversation here about access versus success. And the resources we're talking about on campuses such as like the Writing Center, Academic Success Center, and tutoring, professor office hours, things like that. Those are geared towards, how to make you successful in this course, how to help support you in those particular ways, and absolutely lean on all of those resources. I for sure would not have been able to complete my dissertation without the help of the writing center on the campus that I attended for my PhD. There are all sorts of resources available to you, and just availing yourself with what those are and how they can help you is awesome. And your disability resource center or your disability services office will absolutely be able to provide that information for you and support you in helping you get to know what resources those might look like for you.
And Angie, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Student organizations, great way to meet people. Really, the social support is equally as important as the academic support. Mental health is a huge, huge topic of interest in higher education because we just came through a pandemic and we're still feeling the impacts of reintegration. So make sure that you are aware of what mental health resources exist and also medical or healthcare resources that exist on your campus. And we talked a little bit about office hours. So your professors are subject matter experts, so which means they know a whole lot about what they're teaching you, and they love talking about what they know. And so engage them in that conversation, whether through email or going and meeting with them or talking on the phone. If there are questions about the material they've covered, then you can have those one-on-one conversations with them.
And Ryan, is there any services that you utilized that you can speak to?
Well, yes, I use the math. It wasn't really a service, but it was an accommodation, which was a math one-on-one tutor to help me through statistics because it was very visual. But I think it's great to go to office hours and also to go to the peer education centers. I was a peer educator at my undergrad institution, and they're a really great resource to work with other students that are either in your class or have taken the class, and they can help explain certain things as well outside of office hours. I didn't have to do this as much in my undergrad, but I anticipate having to do it a lot here in law school, which is to go to the writing center for help with formatting and things like that. I struggle to tell when things are properly formatted because it doesn't always italicize where it should, or it doesn't always double space, and I can't visually verify that. So that's one of the things that I had to rely on, was working with somebody, generally a peer educator, and saying, can you verify that this citation is italicized or this paper is double spaced or whatever the issue might be.
Got it. Okay. Anything else there to add, anyone? All right.
This is Lori. If I could just add another to what Ryan was saying, it's important to be able to also articulate and know what things are. If you are working with an assistant, using the proper terminology so that you're saying bold versus italicized versus underline. It's your job to know what is required in each formatting style, so that when the professor turns around and says, oh, well, you italicized this and it should have been bold, you have to know what's what. That's your responsibility, just like it would be for a sighted student. We may just have to learn the words and the verbiage, but it is something to be cognizant of.
Definitely. I can see that sometimes being a point where you don't know it. Learn as you go. All right, our last question. When a student's equitable access needs are not being met, what strategies can the student employ to ensure accommodations are implemented? Angie?
It is important that you let your professors know that you plan to utilize accommodations and that you are working with the disability office and need access. So first and foremost, some schools may provide a letter to the instructor and copy you, and that is your cue to connect with the professor and say, hey, let's have a conversation and talk about implementation of accommodations. Other schools may give you that letter through email and you would send it to the instructor. And so the earlier you're able to do that, the better. and your instructor, and you can have that conversation. If something is not working, let the disability office know right away. And if you are not satisfied with the results of that conversation, there should be a grievance process. And as much as I would love to say that every institution is as wonderful as the ones that I'm connected to, that may not be the case. So I just want to make sure that people know that they have the right, if they feel like an accommodation has not been implemented correctly, or if there's an accommodation they asked for and they think it's reasonable, but maybe the disability office or the institution does not think it's reasonable, that there is a grievance process in place and you have the right to appeal and have that reviewed.
And Hunter, do you have anything to add?
I would say that like Angie had shared, having an open line of communication with your professors, first and foremost, is really going to be key. And your professors, like I've mentioned, really do want to support you and to help you, but they also, they don't know what they don't know. So having a really good open communication, like, hey, you forgot to provide my enlarged text for the in-class reading the other day. Could you possibly bring that next time? Would be a helpful start, maybe. And then if that's a consistent issue, or if there are larger issues, or if that's something that's really bothering you, feel free to reach out to the Disability Services Office. We are so happy to jump in and assist and support you, and kind of help get that ball rolling communication wise too. That being said, if you have questions about like how to chat with your professors or how to talk with your professors about your access needs, we can also coach you through those conversations or walk you through maybe some suggestions or pointers. We're here to be a support for you, and as well as for your faculty too. So we'd mentioned faculty often approach us with questions. So we are a resource for both students and faculty.
And maybe if you're a student and there's something that's working really well for you, you can give your instructor or professor that feedback so that they know and they can continue. Brian, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, not only does the student have to be a really good communicator and keep those lines of communications open with the disability services office, but also with the professor, as Angie pointed out. When I know who my instructors will be, even if it's long before the semester starts. So when I had my list of law school professors in July, I sent them an email right off the bat and just said, my name is Ryan Mentor. I'm going to be in your whatever class contracts, whatever the course was. And these are some of the accommodations that I think I'll need to use in your course. Please let me know if you have any questions for me. That starts the dialogue. And then if you have any issues throughout the semester, many of them will tell you in that reply email, please let me know if things aren't working. And just keep them posted. I feel like this isn't being adequately provided to me per my accommodations, or keep that communication open, let them know. And they're generally really, really willing to work with you and find the best solution, whatever that might be.
Okay. All right. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have some time, we can answer them.
We we do have some questions. So a question came in about the accommodations for exams. So how do you ensure that accommodations are made for tests and exams?
Angie, Hunter?
I can share with how exam accommodations typically work at my institution, if that would be helpful.
That'd be great.
Okay, awesome. So usually when it comes to test taking, we have a testing center on campus that we utilize as a reduced distraction testing environment should a student need to take their exams in a reduced distraction testing setting. We also provide things like extended time on your exams, should that be a need that you have. Similarly, if you need your exams in an accessible format, or if you utilize any sort of text to speech software or speech to text software. Like we can look into all of those things. Ultimately, exam accommodations are unique to each student, so it really is dependent upon what your access needs might look like and how we can accommodate you within those needs, and just kind of see what's going on. So it does depend on each student's situation.
Mm-hmm. And Angie, do you have anything to add?
The process for exams, generally you are going to schedule that exam. So it is the student's responsibility to put that information into whatever system or email communication, whatever that process looks like, so that the people who are proctoring the exam know that you're going to be utilizing accommodations, and then indicating which accommodations, because that may change from exam to exam. You may use Braille for one exam, you may use a screen reader for another. So that communication piece is crucial for scheduling exams.
Thank you.
I can also add too that when you have exam accommodations, your professors are responsible for the implementation of those accommodations. So if you have, for example, time and a half to take your exams, your professor would be responsible for providing you with that time and a half as it is listed on your accommodation letter, and as you indicate when you go to schedule your exams.
So I would like to just touch on that really briefly. So for my undergrad, the process that has just been explained was pretty much what was followed. You had a list of accommodations. In some schools, you'll have slightly different accommodations under a test taking section than you will under like assignments or classroom activities. And you just let the accessibility officer, your professor, you know, depending on if you're using reduced distraction or whatever, know which ones you want to use, and that is all set. For law school here, I haven't had my first exams yet. I'm not looking forward to that, but it's 2 months away, so we won't think about it. The way that they do it's a little different. The professors use not totally impartial grading. So they get all the exams back anonymously, and they score them without knowing who they're from. Because they do that, the academic services actually coordinates the accommodations, so the professors don't know who has accommodations. Because someone has extra time, they might be able to tell if someone got further in the exam that they were one with accommodations. So that's a lot of law schools use that sort of system to ensure that exams are graded fairly. So I don't know if that's commonplace across grad programs as well.
And this is Lori, if I could just add, as somebody who had 20 years between my 2 master's degrees, things were vastly different. The other thing to remember is that if you're going to be using an online testing system, you make sure that you know how to navigate those exams using your screen reader. You don't want to be in an exam and figure out, I don't know how to get this to highlight. Did I really select yes or no, true or false? So that also, maybe if it meant having the professor make a mock exam and using the testing format that they use, you know, so you could kind of play around with a document accessibility wise, that might also be a good option. That comes from personal experience.
As a parent of a child who's blind, I noticed in middle school, some of her teachers would excuse her from either participating in exams or making them a lot easier for her because she was blind. I'm just curious if that ever happened to any of you.
No, we have a legal obligation for equal opportunity, so no.
We
Yep,
have
here
teachers kind of say, oh, do I need to change my exam format for this particular student? And that's where we come in and say, nope, nope, nope. You would provide the same everything for all students in your courses.
Brian, were you going to say something there?
No, I was just going to say the same thing, that I've never had that. Sometimes the way in which you take it might be a little different, you know, if you're using reduced distraction or the timer, those things, but the content has never and should never change.
Yeah. And Katie, I think we've got a couple more questions.
We do. They are coming in, so So that's great. What medical letters or notes does a disability services office need? And when should those, how early should a student or parent get those in for fall enrollment?
Excellent question. Angie, do you want to take it?
Sure. Documentation requirements are going to vary from institution to institution. If you were to show up as a blind or visually impaired student here, I'm not going to ask you for documentation unless there's something that I need more information on. If the accommodations that you're asking are related to the blindness or to being low vision, then we're able to make that reasonable judgment that accommodations are in place for you to have access. There are some institutions who will ask for the IEP, and the IEP should have information about visual status. And if not, that's when you would want to get a note from the doctor that talks about the diagnostic information, the functional limitations, what barriers may exist, how much vision one has, and what some of the recommended interventions the doctor may have.
Anyone else want to add to that?
This is Lori. I will add to that by saying that that is another case where self-advocacy and self-awareness comes in, because a medical doctor, even an ophthalmologist, may not know what you specifically need. So that's where you could say to the doctor, okay, this is how I handle exams, or I fatigue, after reading for 20 minutes. So I would like to be able to have a break if I have long reading or something like that. So it's very individualized, but again, your needs, and you may have to educate your medical professional on that.
And I would just like to add that some institutions, so my undergrad and law school, both like this, don't need something from a medical provider that lists the accommodations you require. They just need something that indicates that you have the disability that you're listing, and then you will work with the institution to figure out what accommodations. So for both SNH2 and CASE, I just had to provide something from an eye doctor or VR that stated I was blind, and then we figured out what would be best for me.
To the part of the question asked, how soon should a student or parent submit the documentation, I believe. And that ultimately will depend on the process that each institution utilizes for students who are requesting accommodations. For Clemson, for example, when you are requesting academic or housing accommodations through our office, you would upload your documentation to your request form. So we would get everything at the same time. We would get your request for accommodations in addition to the documentation. And I do want to emphasize that the student needs to be the one to submit that documentation and that accommodation request form. We cannot accept documentation from a third party, even if it's from a student's parent or their medical provider as well. Like, the student has to be the one to submit everything.
It's a great reminder for parents. Thank you, Hunter. We need to step back. We had a couple other.
We do, yes. So does the campus, does disability services need to provide accommodations for extracurricular activities and clubs?
Angie, do you want to jump in there, or Hunter?
Thoughts, Hunter?
Oh, that's a really good question. When it comes to my institution in particular, if you are participating in like a sorority or fraternity, and you need access to an event on campus, I would say, reach out to our office and we can see what we can do. I specifically work with academic accommodations. So when it comes to extracurriculars and kind of other campus environments, on Clemson's campus. I'm not super familiar with the processes, but you know, connect with your disability services office to see what might be available to you, how we can best support you in that experience, and also working directly with the club or the extracurricular activity that you're involved with to say, hey, I need these accommodations for my equal access to participate in this event or this experience. How can you help me in that?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say it depends on what you're asking for and what the setting is. The university does have a responsibility for accessibility and, in essence, inclusion, right? So you should be able to participate just like any other student in the extracurricular activities. And that could be paratransit to get there. That could be somebody to assist you at that event. I would say, like, when I was a student, extracurricular activities, I would just go with a group of friends because my biggest barrier was getting around. I was able to just walk around with people. But I can think of examples of, let's say you want to go to a theater event, you have the right to ask for things like audio description, right? So definitely talk it through with the disability office. If you feel like you're not able to participate, we're here to help you think through that so that you get the full experience.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add before I move on to the next question? Okay, Katie, can you give us the next question, please?
Sure, and it's another good one. How early in school should a student who's visually impaired begin learning and practicing self-advocacy skills for higher education?
In kindergarten, no.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say as soon as you can.
What's that, Ryan?
I was just gonna say as soon as you can, you know, as soon as any opportunity you can to advocate for any accommodation or anything that you need to help to be successful at any grade, go for it.
Yeah, I
Ryan?
was blessed to have parents who made me do everything as early as possible. I was told, you need to figure this out, right? And I did. And my parents were there to support. And so when I got to college, the transition was really seamless because I was already used to doing that.
And Ryan, was your mom and dad just really stepping back from an early age? I mean, you're 19 and you're already just so accomplished. I'm just curious.
My mom was a really great advocate for me throughout all of my pre-undergraduate, but as she fostered in me my ability to also advocate. So, you know, when I was very young, she was my biggest advocate, and as I got older, I began advocating for myself as much as I could. And I remember I went to my first IEP in fourth or fifth grade,
Okay.
and everyone there, well, we've never had someone that young that's there. But if you can go to those meetings, even at a younger age than normal, and, you know, speak for yourself and be your own advocate, do it.
Excellent. And Katie, back to you. Do you have any more questions or
We
comments?
do, yes. So if people want to take online or hybrid courses, can disability offices help with accommodating those as well? Do those fall under the purview of accommodations?
So when I started at Southern New Hampshire University, I was still in high school, and so I did my first 2.5 years online. Every school is a little different, but yes, at least for me, they fell under accommodations. There's a separate office. There's an online accessibility center and an on-campus accessibility center, but I was able to get the same accommodations. So I still had hard copy Braille things. They were just mailed to me instead of me picking them up. And I still had the extensions on the quizzes or the tests. It was just all online instead of someone in person. So they're modified because of the fact that you don't have a physical venue, but you still have the accommodations in their entirety.
That's great. And Katie, back to you. Do we have any more questions?
Yes. So we may not be able to get to all your questions, but we will try. So should a student switch from an IEP to a 504 plan after high school graduation?
This is Angie. I get that question an awful lot. In higher, we really don't have, we basically don't care, right? Whether there's an IEP or a 504 plan, we just are looking for that history of accommodations that gives us that perspective on what you did use. And then between that and the student's narrative and what information they're sharing with us, we would determine accommodations from that point on. So it really is a misconception that a student should go from an IEP to a 504 plan.
You just want to know what worked back at the high school.
Exactly.
Okay. Another question, Katie?
Yeah, just a comment about someone that what they have their schools, their seniors do is prepare a letter about themselves and their needs so they can have one ready and share with their professors. So that's a tool to have in the toolbox.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. So we have a question here about accommodations for more of a specific class, like an algebra class or math class. Any thoughts on those types of accommodations?
What do students typically request and what's helpful?
Right. So what a student might be eligible for, such as a note taker, let's see, like a note taker, a screen reader. They're two different accommodations, but if a note taker is playing those two roles, what are the responsibilities of someone like a note taker or a scribe, basically? Sorry, had to paraphrase that a little bit.
Yeah. Hunter, can you take that one?
Sure. So essentially, when it comes to determining accommodations for specific courses like an algebra class, we would want to talk with the student and learn like what are your needs when it comes to note taking? What are you looking for when you're taking a math class specifically? We could look into possibly a note taker slash scribe, and that would be likely another student in the course who could note for you what is being written on the board. In most cases at my institution, we don't typically utilize peer note takers super often, but it is definitely an accommodation that we can explore with each student if they're interested in that or if they have questions about that. Other types of note-taking accommodations might also likely be explored when we're talking with the student about this question. So that would be things like looking at how to audio record your lectures, how to have advanced access to the professor's slide deck, or even have access to the professor's lecture material and notes, etc. So it could be, you know, specifically one note taker, or we could look into perhaps a combination of different types of note taking accommodations and kind of merging them all together and seeing what shakes out and what works best.
Yeah, for peer note taker, the disadvantage there is that you lose some independence there, right? They may be taking notes on something that's meaningful to them, but it might be something you already know. So the more you can set up a system to be as autonomous and independent as possible, the better. There are going to be some science classes and math classes where there's highly visual material that is being presented, and that would be a consideration of maybe the institution putting somebody in that it's a paid note taker versus a peer note taker.
Absolutely.
And this is Lori, if I can just add to that. Note taking is an important skill that everybody needs, whether they're blind or sighted. And I think sometimes way too often we say, oh, well, the student can't write as fast enough, or the student can't see what's on the board. I get that the student may not see on the board what's on the board, but we were just given a lot of other opportunities to access the information that's on the board. There are a lot of times when it's also going to be important to write down words that are being said about how how do you balance a certain type of equation, or, memory aids for carrying out the steps of something. Those types of things are still the responsibility of the student, and note-taking is essential.
I'll add to Lori's point in that there, as we've discussed earlier, there are resources on campus that can help students kind of hone in on those particular skills. So note taking, as Lori mentioned, is a skill. And on Clemson's campus in particular, we have the Academic Success Center, and they have workshops on how to take notes in particular courses specifically, such as a math class. The way in which you take notes will likely differ depending on the content of each course. So really looking at what accommodations for note-taking might work well for you, in addition to what note-taking strategies would you need to employ for each course that you're enrolled in.
Thank you. Are we running out of time? I was just going to mention taking notes is something you do your whole life. Sitting in meetings in your 50s, you take a lot of notes. So it's definitely a life skill.
Lisa, I want to thank you, Katie, Lori, and our panelists, Hunter, Angie, and Ryan, everyone for your expertise, your wisdom, and sharing out today. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but I think we got to a majority of them. Be an advocate, be as prepared as you can for college, and reach out in advance. Go visit colleges and look at what you're going to be accommodated with, and see if they have the resources you need. Again, this is College Conversations. This webinar will be up on YouTube in 2 weeks, and you've been viewing Navigating Disability Resources and Critical Campus Supports. We hope we were able to address some of your questions and curiosities. This is why we do this program. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.